excited. The voting happens a week from today, and you know what? They're actually going to know who freaking won. What happened in Iowa is not a great thing for our democracy writ large. But I have to say, it will make New Hampshire's voice all the more powerful a week from today. So to the extent you like that part, just leave it at that part. It's a thrill to be back here on so many levels. I actually went to high school right here in New Hampshire. How many of you knew that? Yeah, I graduated from Phillips Exeter Academy in 1992. They had me back to speak a few months ago, and I said I hadn't been back since graduation because I didn't really have a good time at the school. And then the student body erupted in applause. I didn't know that was going to be the reaction. So after Exeter, I went to Brown University, then I went to law school, spent 5 unhappy months as a lawyer, then left to start a business. How many of you have started a business or organization or mailing list or club? So if you have your hand up, you know a couple things. Number one, it's much harder than anyone ever lets on. And number two, when someone asks you how it's going, what do you say?
Oh, great.
Great. My company too went great until it failed. My parents told people I was still a lawyer. But I had been bitten by the bug. I worked at another small company, then another. Then I became the head of an education company that grew to become number one in the United States and was bought by a public company in 2009. But 2009 was the wake of the financial crisis. It was a very, very tough time in so much of the country. How many of you were here in New Hampshire in 2009, 11 years ago? So you remember that time. And I thought I had some insight as to why our economy crashed in 2008. It was because so many of the wannabe whiz kids I've gone to Exeter and Brown and Columbia with had gone straight to Wall Street and helped create mortgage-backed securities and financial derivatives, these exotic financial instruments that had helped tank our economy. So I thought, what a train wreck that is. That's the opposite of what you want people to do. So I thought, well, what's the most positive, generative thing you could have people do? And the vision I came up with was to head to places like Detroit, Cleveland, Baltimore, New Orleans to help grow businesses. How many of you all work at a nonprofit right now? How many of you all volunteer at a nonprofit? You should just raise your hand to that second one. That's like, are you nice? I was nice that one time. So here's where my wife's understanding comes in, where I came home and said, hey, I want to quit my job and start a nonprofit to help create thousands of jobs in the Midwest and the South primarily. And the way you start a nonprofit, the way I started a nonprofit, was my wife and I put some money in to a 501c3 we formed, and then we started calling wealthy friends with this question: do you love America? And the smart among them said, what does it mean if I say yes? And then I said, at least $10,000. And so then you raise a couple $100,000, that grows to the millions. We helped create thousands of jobs around the country over the next 7 years, to the point where I was honored multiple times by the Obama administration. I got to bring my wife, Evelyn, to meet the president, so my in-laws were very excited about me that week. But unfortunately, I had this sinking feeling traveling the Midwest and the South that the water level was going down, not up, in so many communities. How many of you are from the Midwest and the South? So you may have a sense of what I mean there. And then Donald Trump won the election in 2016. You all remember that night well, I'm sure. How did you react when Donald Trump won? Shock, dismay, surprise. Someone said bourbon. Now, to me, his victory was a very clear turning point for our country. Tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to take a bet on the narcissist reality TV star as our president, which is not business as usual. We've been offered a whole series of explanations over the last number of months, years even, as to why Donald Trump won in 2016. I know you've seen the same things I've seen. Go ahead and shout out the explanations we've been giving. Businessman, not a politician.
$11 million.
Oh yeah, no, so yeah, he had some inheritance going.
Is it an outsider? Is it an outsider?
Outsider, not a politician. Drain the swamp. Disillusionment, Russia. Hillary, emails, DNC, Electoral College, that set of reasons. Sure, like negativity was attractive to some people. I think someone said racism, like that's somewhere in there. Fear-mongering, immigration, fear. So these are the reasons that we've been presented as to why Donald Trump won in 2016. But I'm a numbers guy, Laconia, and the numbers tell a very clear and direct story that many of you may find familiar as to why Donald Trump is our president today. We automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs over the last number of years in this country. And where were those jobs primarily located? Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, all of the swing states that Donald Trump needed to win and did win. And this may be familiar to some of you because we did the same thing in the northern part of your state a number of years ago. We eliminated more than 10,000 manufacturing jobs in New Hampshire. And if you've been to those towns, after the plant of the mill closed, then the shopping district closed, people left, the school shrank, and that town has never recovered. I saw the same thing play out in Missouri, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, the changes that eliminated those manufacturing jobs are now shifting and accelerating in other parts of our economy. How many of you have noticed stores closing around where you live here in New Hampshire? And why are those stores closing? Amazon, that's right, online. Amazon's like a spaceship sucking up $20 billion in business every year, closing 30% of America's stores and malls. The most common job in our economy is retail clerk. The average retail clerk is a 39-year-old woman making between $8 and $12 an hour. What is her next job when the store closes? Waitress, we're not sure. How much did Amazon pay in taxes last year? Zero. That is the math, Laconia. 20 billion out, 30% of stores close, most common job starts to disappear, we get zero back. These are some of the changes you can see around us, but the changes are more widespread than most of us realize. When you all call the customer service line of a big company and you get the software or bot on the other end, you probably do the same thing I do, which is you dial 000, say human representative, until you get someone on the line. Raise your hand if that's what you do. Oh yeah, we all do that, because that software is miserable. We're all like, a person works at this company somewhere, and I'm going to find them right now. But in 2 or 3 short years, Laconia, the software is going to sound like this. Hello, Andrew, how are you? What can I do for you? It'll be fast, seamless, efficient. You might not even know it's software. What will that mean for the 2.5 million Americans who work in call centers right now making $10 to $14 an hour? I just spoke at a group of 70 CEOs in New York City of big companies, and I asked them, how many of you are looking at replacing your back office clerical workers with AI and software? And guess how many of them said yes, they were looking to do that?
All of them.
All 70 of them. The fact is, if they didn't raise their hand, they could be fired the next quarter. Because that's the system we have built. We're trying to optimize for the bottom line, and the bottom line, in many ways, will be getting rid of people and bringing in some software. How many of you all know a truck driver here in New Hampshire? It's the most common job in 29 states. My friends in California are working on robot trucks that can drive themselves. They tell me they're 98% of the way there. A robot truck just transported 20 tons of butter from California to Pennsylvania last month with no human intervention. Why did they choose butter for this maiden voyage? I have no idea. But if you Google robot butter truck, the story comes up. What will this mean for the 3.5 million truck drivers in our country, or the 7 million plus Americans who work at truck stops, hotels, and diners that rely upon the truckers getting out and having a meal each day? Laconia, we're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the 4th Industrial Revolution. When's the last time you heard a politician say 4th Industrial Revolution? 5 seconds ago, right? Just now. And I'm barely a politician. So 2016, Trump wins. 2017, I'm looking through the data saying, oh my gosh, there's a straight line up between the adoption of industrial automation in a voting area and the movement towards Trump in that area. And this transformation is about to accelerate because the technology is getting smarter and more capable all the time. And we feel lucky just to stay about the same day to day. You know what I mean? Like if we didn't get dumber on a given day, it's probably a good day. But the tech's getting smarter all the time. So I went to our leaders in DC and I said to them, we're going through this transformation, we're scapegoating immigrants for problems immigrants have very little to do with. If you go to a factory in Michigan, you don't find wall-to-wall immigrants doing work. What do you find? Wall-to-wall robot arms and machines doing the work that people used to do. So I went to our leaders in DC and I asked, what are we going to do to help people manage this transition? And what do you think the folks in DC said to me when I asked, what are we going to do? Retrain is definitely the most common. How many of you heard this? We must educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. Learn to code, essentially. But I'm the numbers guy. I checked out the studies. You all want to guess how effective the government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs? Not very. 0 to 15%. They were a total dud. The reality is almost half of the manufacturing workers who lost their jobs left the workforce and did not work again. Of that group, almost half filed for disability. We then saw surges in suicides and drug overdoses in these communities to the point where America's life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row. First time in 100 years. Last time that happened was the Spanish flu of 1918, a global pandemic that killed millions. You have to go back 100 years, find a point like this. So when I said this to the folks in DC, one of them said something that brought me here to you all today. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one here in DC will do anything about this. Because fundamentally, Washington, D.C. is a town of followers, not leaders. And the only way we would do something about it is if you were to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads. And I said, challenge accepted. I'll be back with the wave in 2 years. Oh my gosh, for 2 years in the making. You're the wave next week. Where we can actually make this case to the rest of our country that this economy has to actually work for us and our families and our towns and our communities and not the bottom lines of these huge companies. Because you have corporate profits at record highs and your life expectancy is going down. Like, which do you listen to? If you're us, you listen to our own life expectancy. That's pretty common sense. If you're Washington, D.C., just follow the money. Washington, D.C. today is the richest city in our country. Think about that for a second. What do they produce? We're not sure. But business is awfully good. Donald Trump said he wanted to drain the swamp. Laconia, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to distribute the swamp. Why would you employ hundreds of thousands of government workers in the most expensive city in your country? Why wouldn't you move some of those jobs to Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire? This would save us billions of dollars immediately, and I would argue it would improve the decision-making of these government agencies because they actually live someplace normal, as opposed to a DC bubble where they just talk to each other all the time. I'm for term limits for members of Congress. And Laconia, I have a magic way we can get this passed. If I'm your president a year from now, I will go to Congress and say, hey, we should have 12-year term limits for members of Congress, both houses. So let's pass this, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'll pass that? They'll pass that the next day. They'll say, we do this for the American people. Because there's no skin off their back. Like, it doesn't affect me. It'll just affect the person who comes in after me. But eventually they'll phase out and we'll end up with a legislation that actually turns over in a real way. These are some of the big changes we must make, but we also need to make changes that actually make this economy work for us and our families. If you're here today, you know that I'm championing a very dramatic sounding proposal that every American gets $1,000 a month starting at age 18. Raise your hand if you knew that, first of all. Now keep your hand up if this seems too good to be true and almost impossible. Right, so for those of you who still have your hands up, I completely understand. But this is not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country, called it the Citizens Dividend for all Americans. Martin Luther King, whose birthday we just celebrated, was fighting for this when he was killed in 1968, guaranteed minimum income for all Americans. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists endorsed this plan in the 1960s. Milton Friedman's the patron saint of libertarianism, among other things. He likes Milton. So this was so front and center that it passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971 under Richard Nixon, Family Assistance Plan, where it guaranteed an income level for all Americans. And then 11 years later, one state actually passed a dividend, where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how do they pay for it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Data, technology, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A new study just came out that said that our data, your data, is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? If your data is now worth billions of dollars a year, and you're not seeing a dime of it, then where's all that money going? Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, and the trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying nothing or next to nothing back into our society. This is why you have the sinking feeling that there's value leaving your towns and not coming back. This is what we can change. We get the value that's leaving, and in some cases literally being made off of your data, get that value and return it to you in the form of a dividend of $1,000 a month. This would be the trickle-up economy, from people, families, and communities up. Particularly because after the money is in your hands, where would it go? How much of it would stay right here in New Hampshire? Most of it. Not all of it. You might get your own Netflix password. But most of it would go to car repairs you've been putting off, and daycare expenses, and Little League sign-ups, and local nonprofits and religious organizations. This is how we actually reorganize the economy so it's working for us and our kids, and not the companies that are just getting richer and richer. Raise your hand if you're a parent like me and my wife Evelyn. If you're a parent, you have had this sinking feeling that our kids are inheriting a future that is less bright, less secure, and less prosperous than the lives that we have led. Why do we feel that way? Because it's true. If you were born in the 1940s in the United States of America, there was a 93% chance you were going to be better off than your parents were. That's the American dream. That's what brought my family here. That's what we want to leave to our kids. But if you're born in the 1990s in the United States of America, you're down to a 50-50 shot, and it's declining fast. That is why the parents feel the way we do. That is why young people feel like the deck is stacked against you in ways it has not been for previous generations. Because it has been stacked against you. Laconia, this is what we must change. This is why Trump is our president. This is why so many of us feel like we're losing and falling behind. Imagine a country where we can look our kids in the eyes and say to them, your country loves you, your country values you, and your country will invest in you and your future. Do you think that would be a game changer in terms of the way Americans actually feel? We can make that happen next week. That is the joy of this election. We can't act like Donald Trump is the source of all of our problems. He is not. He is the symptom of a disease that has been building up in our towns and communities for years, for decades. That is what we must get to the work of curing. We have to start curing the disease instead of lurching at the symptoms. The political parties have been playing you lose, I lose, you lose, I lose for years now. But who's been losing that entire time? Us. We have been losing. You have record high corporate profits in the United States of America right now. What else are at record highs? Deficit, drug use, stress, suicide rate, student loan debt, mental health problems, depression, anxiety, medical expenses, medical bankruptcies, financial insecurity. We all know this. We all know these are at record highs. Do you know what are at record lows in the United States of America right now? Starting a business for a young person, getting married, having a child, all of the things you associate with a thriving, healthy society are now at record lows in the United States of America. This is what we've allowed to happen. Our way of life is sinking deeper and deeper into the ground, while the companies just keep getting richer, and our government just follows the companies around and cleans up after them, and tries to make sure that they can get even richer than that. That is why Trump is our president. This is what we must change. Instead of pretending that what's good for the companies is good for us, we should measure our country's progress by how we are doing. Our health and life expectancy, our mental health and freedom from substance abuse, our childhood success rates, our clean air and clean water, the proportion of Americans who can retire in quality circumstances. These are the measurements I would use, and the great thing is I don't even need Congress for this. I can just go and say, hey, guess what, GDP, 100 years old and really out of date, kind of useless. going to keep going up even as our way of life deteriorates. So we're going to upgrade it to actually tell us how we are doing. And I'll present the real numbers to you every year at the State of the Union. I'll be the first president to use a PowerPoint deck at the State of the Union. Laconia, you can't solve a problem if you don't even know what it is. And that's where we are right now as a country. If you had the right measurements, you would see we have a mental health crisis on our hands. We have a wellness depression. We have a civic engagement depression. And one of the hidden victims, now there's so many victims of our measurement problems. My wife is at home every single day with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. How much is her work valued at in our current economic measures? 0. She gets a 0. How about every other stay-at-home parent in the country? How about caregivers taking care of ailing loved ones? How about volunteers and activists trying to do something positive? Most coaches and mentors looking after our kids? 95% of artists, unfortunately. You know, one hidden victim in this, Laconia, how about local journalists? We have put almost 2,000 local newspapers out of business over the last number of months because all of their advertising revenue went up to the internet and you can't run a paper on that. What does not function as well if you do not have local news? Democracy, because how can you vote on what's going on in your town if literally no one is covering what's going on in your town? And there are 200 counties right now in the United States that don't have a local paper anymore. These are the things we're supposed to value most in our lives. Our children, our families, our communities, our democracy, and they're getting zeroed out one by one by one. They're getting zeroed out because we've been collectively convinced that economic value and human value are the same things. And that if the market says you have no value, then you have no value. And Laconia, what we have to say loud and clear a week from today is that we each have intrinsic value. Our kids each have intrinsic value as Americans, as citizens, and as shareholders of the richest country in the history of the world. That is what we can change. I'm not running for president of the United States because I dreamt about being president of the United States. Those were not the conversations in the Yang household. My parents were not like, you're going to be president someday. They were like, you're terrible, go clean your room. I'm running for president because, like many of you here today, I'm a parent and a patriot. I can see the future that lies ahead for our kids, and it is not something I'm willing to accept. They deserve better. We should give them better. We must give them better. So this is the vision that we can take to the rest of the country. The number one criteria that Democratic voters have for the nominee is what? Beat Donald Trump. It's very practical. I agree with that. People who are betting money on these things have me as the heaviest favorite in a head-to-head matchup with Donald Trump out of anyone in the field. I'm 3-2. Everyone else is even money at best. Now, why do they think that I am such a clear favorite against Donald Trump? Sure. Well, no, so here are a couple of data points you'll all enjoy. Number one, in one survey, 18% of college Republicans say they would choose me over Donald Trump. Right here in New Hampshire, 10% of Trump voters in the state said they would choose me over Donald Trump. You know who has figured out that I am not the opponent he wants to see in the general? Donald Trump. I am the only candidate in the field that he has not tweeted a word about. Because he knows I'm better at the internet than he is. And his most potent attacks are what? You're a corrupt DC politician, which does not work on me at all. And his team knows this. One of his senior advisors was quoted on video in a private event saying, if there's any candidate we're worried about, it's Andrew Yang. And one reason he does not want to run against me is that I'm not running against him so much as I am running against the reasons why he's our president today. Donald Trump is our president today, Laconia, because he had a very simple and powerful message for our country. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response? America's already great. You remember that?
Yes.
It's been a long 3 years, I know. But it's now coming to an end. That response did not work for many Americans because the problems in our communities are all too real. We have to acknowledge their reality and depth and severity, but then we need real solutions that will actually move our country forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. Laconia, you know we have to do the opposite. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of the 21st century, like climate change. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for this job because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you very much.